that is all paradoxically part of the problem. These efforts overlook like the human element.
Hello and welcome to episode 16, season 1 of your Cyber Threat Intelligence podcast. Whether you're a seasoned CTI expert, a cybersecurity professional, or simply curious about the digital battlefield, our expert guests and hosts will break down complex topics into actionable insights. On this episode of season 1, our host Pedro Kertzman will chat with Gert-Jan Bruggink, who specializes in helping leaders use proven systems to make informed decisions about digital risk. He supports teams all across the world in understanding adversary tradecraft through narratives and systems thinking. He is founder and CEO of The Nation, where he pioneers the field of scenario-based cyber threat intelligence deliverables. Previously, he co-founded innovative startups, fulfilled a cyber threat intelligence leadership role at a Big Four accounting firm, and held security engineering roles at a security integrator. Over to you, Pedro.
Gert-Jan, thank you so much for joining the show. I'm really happy to have you here.
Excited to be here, Pedro.
Awesome. Man, I usually start asking the guests about their journey into CTI. Would you mind walking us through that, please?
Sure. Journey was pretty straightforward. Started in security engineering after having a long time interest in doing the technical stuff we do in cyber, and then slowly moving into more consulting-based effort, helping organizations out why they do certain things, why they want to implement a certain solution. Why is that? That got me into consulting. And at a certain point in time, I was constantly curious, constantly searching, constantly learning. And a big part of that was the reason why people, implement certain solutions is because there's stuff happening all around the world. Mm-hmm. So I tried to understand that as well. That led me on a journey of leading a CTI team at a Big Four company, just being overly curious, interested in all that. And in a nutshell, I'm fast forwarding a lot of years, but that is how I got into the journey, and the journey went on from there.
That's awesome. And so you mentioned you kind of, you knew already, right? You went straight up to detection engineering, but what was the spark, let's say, to drive you to that particular area of the cybersecurity space?
Yeah, to be honest, when I was still in college, I did not have the desire to go into cybersecurity. That IT was great at that time. IT was definitely something. You got all the young talent being pulled out of college with a big fancy lease car and all that stuff. Relatively high salaries, right? And I was like, oh man, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to keep on studying and all that. And then a mate of mine, one of my best friends, he basically went into, he's like, you got to take a look at this. This is like cybersecurity bachelor's program to go into that. And I'm like, this is going to be big. I'm like, that indeed sounds very interesting. So that's how the story began. But I realized over the years that this is a very fundamental problem set, if you will. And fast forward to now, 20 years later, this problem set still is and will be. And, looking backwards, since the dawn of mankind, you had these kind of problems, not in the format of cyber, just to be clear.
Yeah.
But there's always these kind of problems because it's all about humans, and that actually sparks me and keeps me doing what I do every day.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, good analogy. We always go for the innovation advancements first, since the old empires, and only then we think about the consequences. So one of the things that I kind of got to know you and saw your online posts and things like that was related to the CTI maturity model. How did you first came across the team building that? What's the story kind of behind that one?
Yeah, so one of the things I learned in the consulting world is that we try to measure everything, right? And it's just the basic nature of human behavior. We try to measure everything because that makes sense. That is just a rational thing to do. And how you transpose that into wider concepts in cyber, you will get to a framework. You will get to some kind of, common sense, which you can measure everything against. because that it all makes sense, right? Because then we have logical buckets where we can put everything in and classify everything and say how mature we are. Great, you know. Well, in reality, it's not always that black and white. It's usually always gray, and people are often, just, there's a reason why not everyone uses a compliance framework, but still people love clarity. And
That's
people
right.
love the fact that you can, that you can have some kind of measure to say, okay, so this is some kind of ladder, and this is where I am. Now, a couple of years ago, many years ago, I've contributed to numerous frameworks, including that of my employer at the time. We basically built our own maturity framework, because you kind of learn specifically for CTI a lot on, this is how it works. This is what makes a mature team. Now, 2 years ago, I had a conversation with a couple of very smart people. Some of them are friends. Most of them are also competitors, just being honest. But we kind of realized we were all facing the same problem, and that, every single year there's a new framework coming out, and that is just absolutely dumb. Why can't we just make one thing and curate that and actually do what the CTI industry should do, is learn and improve consistently? That was the premise for me to say, all right, let's go. I love it. I like the idea. I love what's going on. So the premise on CTI-CMM is also based on the Capability Maturity Model, model from a U.S. government entity, if I'm not mistaken. And we basically transpose that into the CTI realm. It is absolutely not perfect, and it is designed to not be perfect. It is designed to continuously improve. And I think that these two elements, that is what, practitioner-led, and actually constantly improving. That actually, I think that is a big part what drew me into this, and also that's also what I at least hope to contribute to these, to this sort of stuff, man. Yeah,
that's awesome. If I understand correctly, one of the motivations to do the capability maturity model for CTI was collaboration, right? It stopped that every single different point of view will generate a single model and start collaborating. So we have a more, centralized, if you will, or agreed upon type of framework, which makes absolutely sense. I agree with you there. Would you mind if we deep dive a little bit into the CTI-CMM?
Sure, that's good.
Okay. Any parts of the framework that you think stand out, or perhaps any other parts that you think you see some improvements in the following iterations? Anything around that?
Yes, there are many things, to be honest. And I have to say that for me, it's never good enough. And that is just for me. I think for most of us, sometimes what we put in CTI 0 or CTI 1 is already a huge step. So one of the key lessons I've learned, and I've learned that already for many years, but is that even the first level, going from 0 to 1 is already a lot for a lot of people. And this is sometimes considered a controversial topic, because when you do CTI, you know it all, right? But the CTI industry has to understand that only a small percentage of the actual industry uses CTI the way it should. And sometimes that is also, that dictates the maturity. And this is one of my key lessons learned here is, even going from 0 to 1 is a huge step for most. Going from no persons and having, different roles that do everything from security engineering to detection engineering to incident response to cyber threat intelligence, to having dedicated roles for that, and then having a team that does all of that, right? So that was a big thing of how, working on CTI with all these people who have tremendous experience in that, what they share back. Another thing that we also got back from the initial versions is, again, going back to the measurement. aspects is how do you measure stuff? How do you measure success? And I have to make a little detour to clarify that, because so I'm very interested in the measurement aspects and dashboarding and all that stuff, just from because I find it interesting. And I started curating some stuff like a little Excel file, and all of a sudden, after curating some things for a couple of years, all of a sudden you're an expert.
Yeah.
Well, I don't consider myself an expert in that extent one bit, but I do consider myself very having a lot of experience in this field. So one of the ideas that came up, like, can we not combine, some of these activities from different practitioners also who have been on your show? Can we just throw it all on a pile and see what sticks? And that's what we did actually last year as well. So we created a huge metrics addendum, which is not prescriptive, but more, this is something you can use and have some ideas with. And it's not perfect by design, but you can get some ideas in that. That was also one thing that was very, very well received.
That's nice.
Now, it's so stupid, but people just want to show, they sometimes, what I've also learned is, like, people sometimes just, they can say what they don't like, but they cannot usually say what they like. And what I mean by that is, if there's something, you can formulate an opinion on what that is instead of coming up with an idea which you never thought about. And I think that is what we're trying to do, is we're trying to open people's mind and say, well, you can use this, or you can't, whatever, just do with it whatever you want with it.
Yeah.
And by the way, there's another thing, and that's maybe going into the future, that so one of the questions we also get as feedback, so there's active feedback loop, is how to then operationalize it. So you have a framework, you have measurements, you have tips and tricks and all that. But it's like, what is the little template we use here? And that is something we're working on, because obviously there is a huge component of commercial enablement that we keep in the middle. But full disclosure, I run a company that basically works on publishing, templated content and how-tos and threat scenarios and all that stuff. But I've been very clear to the team and to everyone, like, I think we need to, put all our different things in one basket and just say, these are some of the basics we need as an industry. And just as said, to get people from 0 to 1 more effectively. I think that is something we're still working on, and that is something we all have the content. It's not the problem. It's just more like, how do we make sure that every little step works? And that, I think these are 3 key areas where CTI-CMM actually will work and stand out. Yeah,
that's awesome. Thanks for sharing that. You got me thinking. You mentioned about the different, let's say, maturity levels within most of the individual CTI aspects, that people think they do, a lot of CTI when they actually only do a little part of it. Do you think that would be related, or have you seen any conversations around that could be related to those more quote unquote mature pieces of the equation would be the ones that have more CTI vendors associated to that particular part, and then I don't know, maybe more buzz is created around that particular topic, and people keep pushing that one without actually connecting to the rest of the necessary framework to have a more complete picture of the whole CTI framework. Do you think it could be anything like that? Just maybe brainstorming a bit.
So I have another unique take on this, but I have a bit of a contrarian take on this. I think that, at this moment, there's a lot of tool pushing, and that has been the same since ever I started. And you could, so there's an extensive push on next generation tooling, automation first, build up the perimeter. That is all the craze when I was starting out. But I think, that is all paradoxically, part of the problem. And, these efforts overlook like the human element, the systems thinking, the narrative that connects one problem to the other across different organizational silos, right? And that is actually crucial for integration and adoption. And I think for me, this is so crucial that any decision maker, listens to this. He or she had always thought about that. It's like, why are things disconnecting? Why can't we get that value out of that? And it mostly has to do with these elements being not connected to each other. And for me, I've spent a significant amount of time to get these nuance into industry frameworks like CTI-CMM, and I'm being very honest. Like, there's a clear disconnect between operational intelligence, like really technical intelligence, and the more perhaps strategic applications. And, I think that is definitely a problem, and I would even go as far as saying, if the CTI industry does not resolve this situation before 2030, the current commoditized form will become obsolete.
Interesting.
And I'm dead serious about that. A change needs to happen in this industry, and if it doesn't, it will become obsolete. And I can tell you this, we are already behind. We are already seeing people saying, what is the value of CTI? Should we put it in a role? Should we put it in? It is part of a tool, right? So I think, there's many reasons why, and there's also answers to why the situation is as is, but there's definitely a bunch of misconceptions and all that I think, that lead to this. And to your first point, I also strongly believe that most mature security teams, quite literally, if you would picture like 100% of the entire world as all the companies in the world, then we tend to focus. The emphasis is mostly on like the more wealthy amount of companies, the bigger enterprises. But the reality is that is only a very small percentage of all the companies in the world. So we need to do better in addressing that and educating people that even though that you're a big company, it doesn't matter how many feeds you have. That is not an indicator of quality. That is an indicator of something else, but I'll not get into that. But my point is, people have to tell that story correctly. If you can explain why you're ingesting all that stuff and then what you're doing with it, what kind of decisions you're actually driving, what kind of impact you're making, then the story basically writes itself. The success writes itself. And and maybe one final thing to add on that, I also think that there's a bit of a nuance that teams need to be very big to be successful. So when I did the presentation of CTI-CMM version 1.2 at first was earlier this year, the interesting bit is that some of the maturity is not the bar of the ladder, right? It is actually, either is that, or is it how happy you can make your stakeholders, or how much impact you make. But actually, it is the value is in the eye of the beholder, right? So, and I think these are some of the specific things that we try to tackle with this initiative. But there's actually some, fundamental things happening in the industry which we cannot tackle alone, and we need everyone to do so.
That's a great point, and I'm kind of glad to know I might not be alone on this. You touched on a very interesting point. People think that to have proper CTI in-house, you gotta have X amount of analysts, from people doing reverse engineering, malware analysis, to people doing this and that. You touched on a very good point. That's only for big enterprises. Can afford having those super specialized teams. But on the other hand, I think the small companies, or wanting to be mature companies, regardless of the size, CTI can be more like a mindset. if they start looking at things through the CTI lenses, I think they would just have a better understanding of the things from a security standpoint, of course, that are things that are happening to them, or things, how they could prevent certain things just by having that CTI mindset. And that's might be part of the maturity within the industry. CTI mindset, to connect back to my previous point, might not be the most profitable thing to sell. So maybe not too many vendors are kind of trying to stimulate that type of thinking or mindset.
So Pedro, sorry to interject that.
Yeah.
And I think you highlight exactly the situation. Now, if we're being honest, the core situation at hand is a shareholder-driven value-making machine.
Mm-hmm.
And don't get me as a socialist or anything, because I run a commercial company as well. But I think we have to be honest that we all have to make a living, and it doesn't matter big or small. But there is this incentive structure which isn't correct. And I think for me, a big part of what I do as a philosophy in business, a philosophy in life, how I treat my own team, how I think others should organize their own CTI capabilities, is set up people for success, and that starts with the proper incentive structure.
Mm-hmm.
And that also is part of why I like the metric stuff, not because of cool numbers and shit, but like I just find that interesting. And it's like, if we can measure how high you can jump, then we'll know how high you can jump. But I asked the question, like, what if there is no height? How far can you actually jump? And the reality is that people can do much more stuff if they're enabled and all that good stuff. So, yeah, there's many deeper reasons, again, why this happens and what you are alluding to. But I genuinely think that the one thing we need to fix, and that is not just for CTI, it is for cybersecurity in general, is the incentive structures.
I love that. No, that's a really good way to put it. And let's say you see the journey that we need to go through in the next few years as soon as possible. I would say, but when you look to the past, how do you see the shifts and changes when we first started adopting CTI, maybe 10-ish years back? How do you see that shift, the pace, of those changes from since we started?
Yeah. So let me just say, I find this is my bread and butter, like scenario planning and thinking backwards, thinking forwards. This is absolutely what I love.
Awesome.
More specifically, and I do want to plug some of the stuff I do in threat landscaping and build your own threat landscape type of deal.
Go for it. No worries.
Call me for that if you need help. But like, that is exactly the type of questions we get often. And even today, I was looking at some messaging on social media, specifically LinkedIn, where somebody was asking like, hey, I've been informing people about ransomware for the last 10 years. And I'm like, yeah, but this has been a problem for that long. What changed? And I know what changed, just to be clear, but like, it's pretty interesting to hear people's perspectives on that. And for example, for ransomware, the feedback I received was like, it's gotten much more sophisticated over the last decade, from little scramblings and dumbass encrypting to like multi-billion-dollar companies being crippled and completely business shut down.
Yeah.
So the role cyber is playing in everything, and the digital connected nature of it all, that has fundamentally changed, and it will continue to change. In the next decade, we will see even more integration, even with AI agent aspects and all that good stuff. It will go even further.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the cool things I'm I don't consider myself, a scenario planning expert for all the futures for developing a company. I understand that the way how that is done. I merely apply it to the concept of risk management, threat management, and CTI in particular, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how I then look at these things is like, so back in 2014 when APT1 report got released, a big craze about all that. But what the interesting bit was is through those years afterwards, there is a couple of things happening that were very interesting, and I'm tracking them still. So one of them, for example, is about the focus of certain adversarial states on types of infrastructure. So, and again, I'm bringing up this example because it illustrates what the value is of tracking these kind of trends long term. At the time, obviously, there is just teams, doing advanced persistent, targeting, and it is every country who's doing that. Some have more sophisticated capability. I'm from Netherlands. We have a pretty sophisticated capability, but there's also many other countries who do that. But what I find interesting is if you just take a step back and then look at, hey, so there's teams looking at the external footprint, certain teams from China, for example, and they used to be the top players in the pwn-to-own games. And then all of a sudden, if I'm not mistaken, 2015 or 16, and all of a sudden you see them dropping out for reasons of that competition. And what is interesting is if you track these trends over time and look at them now to today. Again, I'm nerding now, just to be clear. but you kind of see that the focus of these kind of Chinese adversaries on technical infrastructure, it started in that little thing right there. Just a strategic effort focusing on one particular tool set, and they now have dozens of people, reverse engineering, FortiGates and all that, and that stuff I find so super interesting. It's like picking up these little threads across, and sometimes you can only see them after a period, and sometimes you can actually see them right now. And that is pretty interesting because I'm obviously this is the work I do. There is a couple of threads I'm now pulling, and I'm thinking like, holy ships, this is not going in the right direction. So so there's many things what people can do, should do, and how they should use CTI, and some very cool stuff. But yeah, that is that. I hope that answered a bit your question. With a wider turn.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And to your, I think you were going on that direction. If there was, let's say, one thing you could suggest to organizations implementing CTI, any particular, one single aspect to focus on, any magic pill, if you will, kind of thing that they should focus on?
Yeah, I think I alluded to it before, but so for me, the one thing that the industry is lacking is not showing enough value. That is a symptom of something deeper.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, there's multiple reasons why that is the case. And what I always recommend people to do is to explore the concept of systems thinking. And what that is that you look at an organization holistically, that you look at an industry holistically. And that is difficult in an industry where everyone's a scientist and is focused on the here and now, where the amount of indicators and the incidents you're managing now is more important than anything else.
Yeah.
So looking forward, you have to be able to show value. And what I'm always teaching classes, clients and everything is dare to do something different, and dare to open your eyes and have a discussion on, well, if we take a wider lens, we're protecting this business process and we aren't talking with these people associated with that business process. The lapses kids, they will call everybody in each process, right? They will call the parents of these people. They don't have any ethical boundaries. By the way, this is also one of these threads I mentioned when I was very concerned about certain things. This is one of them. But like that is exactly how you need to think, right? You need to let go of that siloed thinking, and systems thinking is one way to do that. I literally, on my desk next to me, I have a ton of books on scenario planning, systems thinking. Exactly, I'm going through them regularly, and I deeply recommend people to do so, because just sometimes these ideas just help.
Absolutely. And you mentioned something that for me, honestly, whenever we are talking about any type of intelligence, in our case, CTI, but it could be any type of intelligence, it's and talking to books, right? Probably one of the most ancient books I ever came across is Sun Tzu, the Art of War, right? If you don't know your enemy, you're mentioning they have no boundaries. If you don't know that, you're never going to be able to properly prepare to whatever they're trying or they will try to do against you. So that's the fundamental piece. Again, could be CTI, but could be any type of preparedness, if you will, when you're tackling either sometimes even competition, right? Not only enemies or adversaries, but even competition, right? Man, that's great. That's great. Thank you. And let's say on the consulting, you're talking about the big four. What would be like the difference or the different approaches you're seeing on that particular sector when tackling CTI, and the value from other sectors, for example? What's the main difference between the big four when they approach CTI and the other non-consulting sectors?
Yeah, I think one of the changes I also saw in the last decade is that there's much more experience and openness to have people who have any background or any experience and translate that to today. So the consulting model in general is real and it's good. People sometimes just need help, and that is just a fact of life. Mm-hmm. So what I've seen change over the years is that people just got more specific in their requirements, and the reason why you would hire a big four team is not because of sometimes it is because of a badge, right? That you can say that this team did that, but there's all sorts of other defense contractors and all that who have that same vibe. Now the difference is that where are they coming from? And what you often see is that the more the big four consultancy teams, they come from a consulting background. So they bring that level of experience with them. And there is a pros and cons to that, right? The upside is that you get a lot of content quite quickly because they're very smart people, but they're expensive. The downside is that you're trying to push their whole consulting stack into your organization. People don't like that, but that is the reality. But you kind of see that there's definitely consulting expertise in that, but it will always come from the angle of the product that you're selling. And just to be clear, I have many friends in all industries and all sectors, so I totally understand completely how it works. But that is what you need to think about. There's also many. There's also interesting. There's also many people who started self-employment, even me in a sense in 2020. Mm-hmm. Just building a company with a couple of friends at the time, and then we started growing, and then that is something that everyone basically does. Right now, the founder-led brands is definitely a thing, especially in this field. I consider myself somebody who saw it all and then decided there has to be a different way. So, also being transparent, my way of working is like I absolutely enjoyed every single moment I had with the Big Four consulting thing, but I realized that the consulting model is deeply flawed. So my fundamental approach is like, can we stack the incentives in the correct way? And that is not necessarily product driven, but that, for example, people get the tools and means to do everything themselves, and they only call me or my team when they actually have a really, really interesting question. Mm-hmm. And that is how I, for example, try to do it a bit different. Does that work all the time? No, it is a hard journey. And I think that is also something that people often not talk about, is we understand consulting and we understand product. And I'm digressing a bit from your question, I know that, but like,
No worries.
but that is sometimes we only think in black and whites, but there's actually something that can happen in between. And that is definitely something I've seen change. I've seen small companies funny anecdote, when I started in the security engineering space, there was one little brand that just released their new firewall. It was called the next generation firewall, a little company called Palo Alto Networks.
Yeah.
And, they're now one of the biggest security platforms on the planet, fast forward many years. And I think that is also what this does, right?
No, that's awesome, and that nuance, not having only black and white is so important, because those overlooked aspects is often the ones that are gonna come back to us in one way or the other, because we didn't have the ability to be flexible and adapt to so many different scenarios that we have in front of us. And so you're mentioning books. Any how you learn about the industry in general? It's a tricky question sometimes when you're talking about CTI, because I learn from the feeds, right? Because we receive so many information through the feeds. But generally speaking, about the industry, right? The feeds will be on the operational, right at that moment kind of side. But what about the broad learning from how the industry is like reshaping maturity models as well? Who's coming out with a new maturity model if that happens? How, generically speaking, how you learn about how the CTI industry is like moving and all that. Any, like, you're mentioning your books. If you want to mention the names, I can definitely put on the description of the podcast. But any other blogs, events you mentioned first as well, that you like to use to kind of sharpen your knowledge?
Yeah, so I have a bit of an unconventional answer, because there is no right answer to all of this.
Yep.
A book, a feed, a podcast. I can name some of the stuff I listen to, but in the end, and this goes back to like a previous question. What are some of the common misconceptions? Is what I see is people not thinking. And I want to encourage people to be curious and ask to get to a certain set of books. You have to ask yourself the question: what do I think is important? What do I want to understand? And the biggest, the best kept secret of our industry is that there is no quick win. There is no quick escape. There is no, all right, let me just roll up this AI summary and then boom, I'm now an expert. No, that is not how this works. So it is absolutely in the trenches. It is boring as tease, where you will get punched in the face and you have to keep going. That is this work. So the question is, how do you deal with that? And how we deal with that is by asking the right questions and then understanding that there's something fundamental going on around certain threats and campaigns around the organization. So how do I protect my organization? Am I looking at the organization with the right perspective? And if you dive deeper in that, you should explore systems thinking, for example. Me, for example, I'm next to CTI, scenario planning, risk management. I'm also very interested in scenario planning, and that's more of a content thing. But also, I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm also deeply curious about new entrepreneurial things, specifically building brands and how does that work. And very interesting that journey leads me to basic psychology, and there's huge amount of overlaps between behavioral science, behavioral psychology, and cybersecurity. Interestingly enough, so there's also numerous books on that, even cultural, how to build a team and all that stuff. But when you get into that deeper understanding, then you all of a sudden will eventually have to get into the task of today. And that could be, tracking what is happening every single day. And there's many tools which you can set up, such as, some of them even free, such as using Feedly to translate those questions or intelligence requirements into something where you can scrape it from. Even going a step further, you can just set up your own AI agentic aspects that just collects everything you need, and based on their automatic prompting. There's many things, but you have to do the thinking. And there's a host of people you should follow, but generally, when you basically know what you're looking for and you understand it, you will find these people. You will Google them. You will find perhaps me. You will find perhaps most of the other people on this podcast, or even more. And that is usually how I do it. And then the next question is, where do you find them? Well, I find them in two conferences, actually many conferences, but most of the conferences I always try to attend to is the first CTI and Sans CTI. These are more bigger conferences, but they are very focused on the CTI domain. That is where I basically grew up in. But actually, there are many more. I even with a shout out to John Doyle. We also, I think, on your podcast once. We once with some beers, we made a square, the Gartner quadrant type of idea for CTI conferences. It's still a work in progress. I've put it on my GitHub, but it's just so stupid. But it's so funny to actually have that conversation and think like, so which are the ones we should attend? And then you kind of see some pretty interesting stuff around very specific conferences focusing on very specific tasks. Again, how the industry evolves, and from very big, all over the place items to something like PivotCon, specifically focusing on the technical aspects. Absolutely brilliant. And or even in the US, some of the more crime focused events, and I can name a bunch more, but I absolutely love that. I actually love that we now got in the space in the last decade where we are able to structure more of the information we have. We have an unprecedented amount of data, an unprecedented amount of structure. And now the question, I think, for the next couple of years going into 2030 is like, how do we deal with that? And to be honest, if I would do another education piece, it would not be a master's degree in engineering, or it would be a master in philosophy, because where we're going, we're gonna need philosophy.
Yeah, no, that's a good one. You touched on a very good point as well. If we look at the CTI industry is evolving for the past few years. We never had CTI focused conferences. Right, it was like a part of that conference. They had like a CTI track or something like that. It's still, I think Black Hat has a CTI track and other big conferences. But now we do have, like you mentioned, PivotCon is like I think it's a TLP Red, if I'm not mistaken. So you cannot simply, I want to go there. So it's really for professionals that understand already some of the aspects within the industry. I want to sharp their knowledge, and it's important to from TLP clear or not, to have those conferences creating more buzz around CTI, just to make people think about it. It goes back to my point, and you mentioned that as well. We have to think about CTI more, right? It's not something that you plug. Oh, now I have CTI. Right, so imagine that would be perfect, right? You plug something, Ethernet cable, boom, now I have CTI. That's awesome. I would love that, but that's not, unfortunately, the reality.
Yeah,
that's amazing. And any final thoughts, reflections, philosophy things you think it's worth to share with the audience?
Yeah. So I think I'll step off my soapbox and I'm not
Fair enough.
I'm not going into some of the other stuff I mentioned. I think I'm pretty consistent in what I think and what I share about. I think that a lot of people have a voice, and I personally try to actually show people that there is something else possible outside of the normal, it is either a tool or it is a consulting, or No, it is actually also possible to do something in between. It is good to actually change the state or attack the status quo. That is also fine. And I think the next iteration of what we will see in cybersecurity it will not necessarily be an AI agentic approach or whatever, but maybe it will be a hybrid approach on how people are thinking and supporting that and integrating everything all together. And yeah, what you can expect from me is that I'll keep pushing on certain solutions to bring, talk about actual problems and understand that, bring solutions to market for that, and also bring that knowledge back to the community through frameworks like CTI-CMM, or even radically open sourcing some content that people can use. And that is also, to end it off, that is also an invitation to everyone listening. If you want to contribute on that particular framework, go to the website CTI-CMM.org, if I'm not mistaken. And the reality is that you can just sign up there for the latest version, for feedback, for participating. And we actually need all the help we can get. And we are very appreciative of that. And that will also get you a slot in the document itself, So that is also a win. And you can put that on your resume. So that is a huge win. And yeah.
That's awesome.
That is what I have for you, my friend.
That's awesome, man. I appreciate it. And, my little take about the CTI-CMM, one of the things or one of the highlights for me is that you guys went deep into here are the questions that you need to ask your probable stakeholders. So you kind of go from a high level understanding of this is how you structure, this is all the important pieces, the important components, but this is how you do it. Go ask those questions, kind of thing. So it's goes on from super, more management, leadership type of aspects, but also hands-on. Here you go ask those questions. So that's absolutely. I'll put the link just in case in the description as well, so people can access
Please do it.
The framework. Absolutely important to get to know in details. Gert-Jan, thank you so much for coming to the show. Really appreciate all the insights, and I hope I'll see you around.
Sounds good, mate. Thanks so much for being here. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
And that's a wrap. Thanks for tuning in. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. Got thoughts or questions? Connect with us on our LinkedIn group, Cyber Threat Intelligence Podcast. We'd love to hear from you. If you know anyone with CTI expertise that would like to be interviewed in the show, just let us know. Until next time, stay sharp and stay secure.